All right, well, we are getting ready for the first panel of the day. Many thanks again to the gala for setting the tone, right? You all do such an amazing job. Our girls will be joining staff from the Girls for Gender Equity organization in New York to work on the Pennsylvania Black Girls Equity Agenda in just a moment. So, girls, you can make your way there, and we look forward to hearing what you all come up with at the end of the day. And we are extremely excited for today's panel because we're drilling down into local and state level policies, local and state level policies. And I've been thinking a lot, as I said, about Teresa Younger's remarks yesterday, and it really made me think that the work is here. This is the work. Grassroots advocacy always has the power of the people, and the people indeed do have power. And so when it comes down to thinking about what's happening on the federal level, that's obviously really important, right? That's where our funding streams often comes from, executive policies and orders, et cetera. But also that does not diminish the power that we have here locally. And so we have some amazing people for our panel, and it is called One Big Beautiful Pivot, Mapping the Current System, Policy and Funding Landscape Impacting Our Youth. Let me make my way on stage, y'all. 1 second.
Thank you, Kathy. I am going to read just very brief bios because these are some amazing individuals, and so we could go on and on. But first we have Laura Stephanie here on the end, who is a new senior policy analyst at the Institute of Politics. She brings more than a decade of experience in public policy, nonpartisan advocacy, health equity, and nonprofit leadership. She comes to the IOP from the Prenatal to 3 Policy Impact Center at the Peabody College of Education and Human Development at Vanderbilt University, where she worked as a senior state policy analyst. Laura also contributed to the development of the annual Prenatal to 3 State Policy Roadmap, a resource that guides state leaders on the most effective investments to ensure all children thrive from the start. Please clap it up for Laura. And then we have Malik Pickett, who is a senior attorney at Juvenile Law Center, where he advocates for the rights of youth in the juvenile justice system through litigation, amicus, and policy advocacy efforts. Specifically, Malik is a member of several statewide coalitions through which he advocates for robust juvenile justice policy reform in Pennsylvania. Prior to joining JLC, Malik functioned as legislative counsel for the Honorable Pennsylvania State Senators Shirley M. Kitchen and Jay Costa, who we all know well. Welcome, Malik. And it is my honor to introduce Harold Jordan, who is a nationwide education equity coordinator at the American Civil Liberties Union of Pennsylvania. He is the author of Beyond Zero Tolerance, Discipline and Policing in Pennsylvania Schools, co-author of Cops and No Counselors, How the Lack of School Mental Health Staff is Harming Students, co-author of Student Arrest in Allegheny County Schools, The Need for Transparency and Accountability, and the editor of Know Your Rights, a handbook for public school students in Pennsylvania. You have so much free time, don't you? Mr. Jordan serves on the Professional Advisory Board of the Learning Disabilities Association of America, and he participated in the 2015, what a time to be alive, White House Rethink Discipline Summit. Things have certainly changed. And then we have Dr. Alicia Lentz, my friend, Program Coordinator, AIU, and Principal, Community School East. Dr. Lentz is a distinguished veteran educator of 23 years who serves at the Allegheny Intermediate Unit, again, AIU. And previously, she was the statewide regional school improvement team manager for the Pennsylvania Department of Education. In that role, she supported 96 schools across the Commonwealth that were designated for comprehensive support and improvement through ESSA. Prior to that, she has also held several leadership positions in school districts throughout the greater Pittsburgh region, serving as a teacher, assistant principal, curriculum coordinator, and assistant superintendent, a master educator. Indeed, welcome to all of our panelists. Okay, y'all, so let's just come out the gate with it, because a lot has changed since the beginning of the year. It came at us fast. And we've spoken over the last 2 days or so about how some advocates and organizations have seen their life's work just evaporate or completely halt. And I want to start with Laura here. How would you map or describe the policy landscape today from your area of expertise, especially in terms of access, equity, and support?
Yes, so my area of expertise, I have a heavy experience in health, children's health and maternal health. I did that work for all 50 states and the District of Columbia when I was at Vanderbilt University, focusing on the region here. Now that I'm part of the Institute of Politics, prior to that I was at Allies for Children working in health policy. Also had worked at Sojourner House with moms and with their children as they navigated substance use disorders. So all that area, health and education, but the biggest thing for me, which impacts everything, health, education, access to economic supports, and being able to be financially stable, the biggest thing to me are the massive Medicaid cuts that we saw coming out of HR 1. And that is something that, is the biggest cut to Medicaid in the program's history. That's something that has been around since the 60s, since Lyndon Johnson's administration. And it's the biggest rollback of health coverage for our country ever. And it's going to have a huge impact on families, working families. We hear about these work reporting requirements and how it's meant to get people working, but it's really going to harm folks who are working and who just can't navigate the red tape. We know how exhausting it is to navigate social programs already, and this is just going to make it harder. It's going to harm states that are being forced to implement these requirements against their will. They have a chance to implement work requirements over since the first Trump administration, and only a few have done it. Nobody wants to do it. It's going to cost a lot of money for states. We'll see big consultants getting hired to help states navigate implementing this program. So working families are going to be hurt. We see that it's a lot of adults, low-income adults in the Medicaid expansion states. 40 states have Medicaid expansion. That's up to 138% of the federal poverty level. Those are working families, and PA being one of them. Just because the adults are targeted by this bill, it's also going to hurt children. It's going to hurt children in low-income families. It's going to hurt children with disabilities, children of immigrants. And it is something where we're going to see cuts to school districts' budgets because one of the biggest federal sources of funding that goes to school districts, most of it is from state and local funds, but the federal funding, a lot of it comes from Medicaid. It helps people with special education, students with IEPs, get the education that they are guaranteed under federal law. And all of this is happening. These storm clouds are brewing. I talk about my health policy expertise, but it ties into education, like I just said, at the same time as they're gutting the Department of Education. So, the Office of Civil Rights, the different pieces of the federal administration that are meant to guarantee an equal public education for everybody, those are going away for a lot of special ed students. So it's just a lot of factors brewing, storm clouds looming, and how we respond is going to be really important.
Before we get to Malik, a quick follow-up for you, Laura, because you touched on this. I think people hear Medicaid cuts and they think just individual services, access to the doctor. But can you go a little bit deeper around everything that Medicaid actually funds?
Sure. So Medicaid funds rural hospitals. Medicaid funds community health centers and health clinics that provide reproductive care. Medicaid is something almost half of the children in this country are born on Medicaid because it's something that funds, if you're pregnant, you qualify for Medicaid if you're pregnant and low income. A lot of folks in the country, the births are Medicaid births. Medicaid funds school services around special education. I'm sure Dr. Alicia can talk about that a bit as well. So anything from physical and occupational therapy in schools, speech therapy, school nurses' salaries, school psychologists, as we see the rates of anxiety and depression and suicidal behaviors going up among our kids. There are a lot of important things. Rural hospitals, that's another, I don't know if I mentioned that, but in small towns, the hospitals wouldn't be able to make ends meet and keep their doors open without the Medicaid funding. And there was a little bit of a bone thrown to that by the administration, and it's not enough to cover the costs for the rural hospital fund. It's a small fraction of what Medicaid does. Medicaid is it's a state and federal partnership. And the federal government pays like 90% and states pay 10%. This big, beautiful bill took away states' ability to raise their portion of the financing that they use to fund this program. They're not allowed to do provider taxes anymore under this bill. So it's meant to hamstring states' ability to cover the people that they want to cover. And it's going to hurt state budgets in a way that states and schools, they're either going to have to raise taxes to make up for the loss, or they're going to have to cut services. And that's, we see the work requirements being something. It's like, it's veiled, it's a veiled attempt to knock people off of coverage.
Thank you for that. Just wanted to situate how much of a seismic shift this is.
Yeah, $990 billion over 10 years.
Whew. Okay. A lot to discuss for sure, and you already kind of helped us to understand how this impacts all of our systems on this stage. So Malik, I'm coming to you next. What does it look like for juvenile justice?
So in the juvenile justice field, one of the things that just happened recently was there was about $170 million in cuts to programming to grants under the Department of Justice. And so they were basically wanted to reprioritize that money and kind of divert it back to law enforcement, different things like that. So they were cutting things like youth violence prevention and community-based alternatives that would, prevent, youth violence and youth crime from happening, and that would also, when those things do occur, create avenues for youth to be served within their communities where they have much better results as opposed to being sent to the juvenile justice system. So those historic cuts, have really kind of crippled really great organizations. One that we've done a lot of partnership with is the Galt Center, which is one of the organizations that provides training to juvenile defenders across the country. And so they have a lot of really great resources. They put on a lot of great CLEs, a lot of great conferences, trainings, different things like that. So I think they lost like $800,000 in grants, something like that. So there's just been historic cuts in these really key areas that have really been built up over the past couple of decades after the rise of the super predator myth and the tough on crime policies, when we were able to kind of walk all those things back, and now we're kind of seeing things kind of cycling back again. And one of the alarming things that happened was when President Trump made the decision to federalize the DC police force and to employ the National Guard in DC. He was giving a lot of messaging about roving bands of youth, and really kind of hearkening back to a lot of the kind of super predator myths and kind of demonizing children and saying that they're these really dangerous kids that are coming around and that are doing all these really heinous crimes and all these violent crimes, which isn't true, because crime is actually still very low. It reached a very historic low in 2019, right before the pandemic, and rates are still very low, and especially in DC, crime rates are down significantly compared to this time last year. So his kind of rhetoric is just untrue, and it's doing nothing but creating more narratives that tend to influence, federal policies, but then also state and then also local policies, because people kind of buy into all of this rhetoric, and it's really having dire consequences for youth.
Thank you, Malika. We had a presentation yesterday led by Dr. Sarah Goodkind, an update to our report on Black girls and the inequities that they're facing. And so it'll be interesting when we come back around to you in our discussion, just to figure out how to protect the work that's happened here, because it has been pretty significant as far as the gains are concerned. Harold, what about you? What are you seeing from your expertise and your purview as far as shifts are concerned?
So I have long been concerned about equity in education. I work principally in the K-12 space. So let me give you the short version, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I mean, we're dealing with a lawless federal government that actively supports and promotes race discrimination, undermines equitable education, and destabilizes public schools. Now, that's the short version. I think what's interesting about it is that there is a pretty robust body of federal law that supports equity. I mean, schools are in the equity business, and if you look at the alphabet soup of federal laws that have been passed since, say, 1964, all of them in some way address equity. And given the sort of federated nature of education, in other words, that the federal government doesn't run schools directly, but a lot of decisions are made at the state and local level, I think that has opened up some possibilities for, that has placed some limitations on what the federal government can do when it pushes bad policies. And that's the thing to keep in mind. However, where the federal government has been successful in implementing its new agenda is in destabilizing schools and destabilizing the finances of schools. Now, while they have not been so successful in cutting outright without some process the core funds that schools receive under the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, not yet. They're moving in that direction. What they have been doing, however, is just not paying their bills. I mean, so you might have heard that a couple of months ago they just announced that $7 billion that had been allocated to schools that they're just going to place a hold on for no particular reason that they chose to announce. And so school districts were forced to sue the federal government, and they said, okay, we'll give you 1.68, we'll release 1.68 billion of that, and then eventually they had to release all of it. Now, when you think about things like that, and you think about the fact that in addition to core education funding under Elementary and Secondary Education Act, or Every Student Succeeds Act, the federal government also provides grants for things like teacher training, training of school psychologists, and things like that. Those funds have largely been cut off. So that the core education funds are still there while they work through the legal process of trying to decide or get approval for cutting off those funds. Those grant funds have been cut. And so you've had a situation where school districts have had to lay off people, have had to close after school programs. And there are not very many, in my view, school districts in the country that have big pots of money sitting around where they can regularly absorb that level of destabilization. That's the thing to understand. There are some, but your average school district can't absorb just having a grant that's signed, staff already hired, people working, and then be told that we're not paying the bill. That is a threat. But again, I think there's also an opportunity in the sense that I think that some of the litigation around that, including the litigation that we've mounted against some of the anti-DEI stuff, has been successful in blunting some of the demands that the federal government has made on school districts, K-12.
Can I ask you, I just want to, this may be for everyone up here, but I want to start with you, Harold. Why aren't there more lawsuits? My former law professor and mentor said that it feels like many of us are folding like cheap suits. And one thing about me, baby, is I love to sue. I love a lawsuit. The ACLU gets my donation every single month because I know the power of the legal apparatus, although it can move slowly to demand that our rights are being upheld. Is it just too much too fast? Why aren't we seeing more litigation filed?
I think it's too much too fast in too many different areas of public life. It's not just in schools, it's in every area of public life. And, law firms have been intimidated. And so that law firms that might have provided some pro bono services, maybe even collaborating with the ACLU, are not doing that for the most part now. So I think that's a piece of it. Also, these lawsuits are expensive and they're difficult. And in some ways, in some areas, you're dealing with untested areas of the law. I mean, the government has not tried to do some of the things that it is trying to do now. And so, they're complicated. I do think in the K-12 space, however, there's a much more clear sort of legal path. But, the other part of it is that there's a climate of intimidation and bullying that it results in school districts not defending themselves when they know that what they're doing is consistent with the law. I think that is beginning to change, actually, that some school districts will resist efforts to sort of undermine civil rights laws. But that's not going to happen in a lot of places.
That's fair. That's fair. I'm just thinking about when I was little, I had to face the bully on the school bus, and my grandparents raised me. And so I ran home and was crying and said, Grandma, the bully. And she said, what are you crying for? You stand up to the bully. You stand up to the bully. And so, Leisha, I know that you have faced this directly, sending love and compassion to you, but talk to us about what this has been like.
Sucks. I'm so mad sitting here with y'all just because I shouldn't be sitting here. Shouldn't be. I shouldn't be telling you that my program lost its funding. And I had to lay off amazing teachers and lay off principals. And now, after 12 years, I'm a principal again, but I love it because I get to be back with the kids. I shouldn't have to tell you that I spent my teaching career in Aliquippa, which was one of the best experiences of my life, and those kids in that community taught me how to love. I shouldn't have to tell you that for 10 years I was in the Woodland Hills School District, and it was the best time of my life because of the kids. I still live in Woodland Hills. My daughter, who's here, goes to Woodland Hills. I believe in public education. I believe in diversity. See, I get a little crazy because we shouldn't have to be doing this in 2025, but we're doing it, right? So I printed out some numbers because I was so angry yesterday, and I didn't want to forget them and mess them up. So, like Laura said, billions held from the federal government, but in Pennsylvania it's $230 million. But that breaks out to $70 million for teacher training, $20 million for English language learners, okay? $55 million for academic enrichment, $54 million for after-school programs, $18.6 million for adult basic ed and family literacy. That is also our programming that's in the jail for incarcerated adults, is our adult basic ed, right? And then your migrant education, $11 million. So that's just in Pennsylvania. But what I will tell you is this. There are people that are, to your point, Tashira, that are willing to fight for our kids. There are people that know that it's wrong. But this isn't new, guys. Education in Pennsylvania is unconstitutional. They told us that, 3-4 years ago? It's unconstitutional? Have we done anything yet? Okay. And nobody appealed it. So what's that mean? That they're fine with it. Yeah, it's unconstitutional. So I just told you where I work. I told you where I live, right? So yes, school districts that, because it's funded on your zip code in places like Braddock, in places like Raymond. But I live in Churchill. That's fine. But I'm still paying for a quality education for my daughter, and I believe in it. But so districts, and I don't want to name districts because we could sit here and start naming districts. I'm not going to do that. But you know what I mean. So when you talk about Medicaid funding, when you talk about different funding for programs. So I'm an alternative ed, right? So school districts send me kiddos that have been removed from school for a short placement or if they've been expelled. Listen, I'm sitting in the pipeline, y'all. I've been saying it for years. I am the pipeline, right? But when you start to talk to these kids, most of whom are addicted to vaping, most of whom are addicted to marijuana, the THC, all the things, vaping since they were 7, 8 years old. I have 8th graders expelled for marijuana possession, okay? And where do you think they come from? All right? And so what we have to do is we have to get treatment for these children, because what is leading up to you wanting to puff a vape, right? All of the traumatic things that are going on in your life. And it doesn't mean that it just happens to poor black and brown kids, because I have kids from affluent neighborhoods that are hooked on it, right? And so when you want to do mental health therapy, when you want to do family-based therapy, Medicaid pays for a lot of it. I look for programs that accept Medicaid, as well as private insurance, right? And so it's very hard, because if you accept Medicaid, you have to accept clients from all over the place, right? So it's difficult. So what I do specifically in our program is I was able to fund it. So we have Upstreet that comes in, and they're a wonderful organization that does a lot of mental health counseling for our kids. We also have Turtle Creek Valley and Devereaux that do a drug and alcohol diversion program for kids. What we need is more funding for programs and community providers, because I always say, and people get mad at me, but I don't really care, The school is the center of the community, and the community is the center of the school. And until we start acting like it and believing it and doing that family engagement, we're not going to go anywhere, right? So there's a lot of things, and when you give me the mic, that's a bad thing, because I'll stay up here all day if you want me to. But I will say this, that these kids are amazing, they're brilliant, they just need a little bit more love, and we cannot let them go. We can't do it. We've been faced with this in education for years in Pennsylvania. We know the strife, right? But now it's really time that everybody has to, rise up and do what's best for kids. And my last point is this, because working at the AIU, I've said this for years, the fact that universal pre-K is up for debate in this country is disgusting. It's disgusting. They don't want us to start out on the right foot. They don't want us to start out even.
Can I just add something to that? I mean, I think it's important to understand that all kids have needs. So I just like the term special needs. All kids have needs. They're just different needs. And, that's recognized in federal law. So there's a whole, as I said, a robust set of alphabet soup of federal laws that address different kinds of needs. And so, I do think we have to sort of reclaim the term equity, which makes me happy that I'm in a crowd like this. We have to reclaim that, because equity is a way of ensuring equity is a way of addressing those diverse needs.
Thank you. So we are in a moment in a season of leaning into an infinite amount of possibilities. What we once knew has been torn down. And so I want to start with you, Laura, because you are at the very beginning of this all with your expertise around early childhood and family policy and development. What do local and state solutions and interventions look like during this time?
So during this time, I would say something that you all mentioned in the intro remarks today, recapping what you all talked about yesterday, we're really going to need to make sure that policy making, we can do this at the local level and then up to the state level, that the policy making is happening in collaboration, having the community drive the policy making, not so much of what has happened in the past is people in high-paying jobs or people who don't necessarily know what it's like in Woodland Hills School District. They're the ones who are making the policies, and if something goes wrong, it's we're going to come to the community and see, what do you recommend now? So like you said, it's an opportunity to rebuild everything basically from the ground up. Things have been so disrupted beyond repair. This is an opportunity to set things right and build things back the right way. I think that this, like you all said, nothing about us without us. And I think that we're, Alicia also had mentioned family engagement and the community engagement with respect to school district level interventions, hyper-local. But at the same time, you also want to see some collaboration among the different districts as well, learning from each other. There are some cohorts that exist in the region where different school districts have the opportunity to learn from each other, superintendents from districts that have vastly different funding capabilities. For example, South Fayette and South Allegheny, very different, but doing similar work, trying to learn from each other. So that is, I would say, rebuilding things kind of from the ground up and having that be community-driven policy making, community-led policy making.
I love the community-driven, community-led, yes. And Malik, I know it seemed like, at least with the commission, we were on the cusp of pretty comprehensive juvenile justice reform in this state. Where did that end up, and where can we be headed now under the current climate?
Yeah, unfortunately, so back in 2020, for those who aren't familiar, former Governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Wolf, convened a juvenile justice task force process that was really born out of the wake of some really horrible abuses that youth were experiencing in residential placement facilities, most notably Glen Mills, which is near Philadelphia. And so youth were experiencing these really grievous harms, and it was getting a lot of media attention. So they convened this task force of 30 stakeholders and It was a bipartisan task force. It was members of the legislature on both sides of the aisle, and they did a comprehensive year-and-a-half-long study of Pennsylvania's juvenile justice system, came away with a bunch of takeaways, including diversions not being utilized enough despite being very effective. Youth are being brought into the system for minor offenses, and black and brown youth face much worse treatment in the juvenile justice system compared to their white counterparts, even when you compare for similar offenses. And so they had all these takeaways. They came up with 35 recommendations for reform, which were very amazing, very comprehensive. They were data-driven, and they were estimated to, if they had implemented all of them, they were estimated to save the Commonwealth about $81 million over, I think, a 5 to 10 year period. So those recommendations were released in a final task force report that is on the Pennsylvania website, Commonwealth's website. You can still read it now. It has some great information. But nothing ever came from that. And so we've been doing a lot of advocacy over the past 5 years since that task force report came out to try to see that those recommendations are more than just words on a piece of paper, that they actually get implemented. And every session, we've had 2 or 3 sessions since then. Every session, these bills get brought up, and incremental progress, and then things just kind of stymie. So I think one of the things that we're really trying to do is center the voices of youth and communities and their families. And I think one of the things that's undeniable in this climate is the actual stories of the youth and their families, because these things, harm is happening to these families, harm is happening to these youths inside of these facilities. And so we are doing a lot of work to really center those youth voices to the various lawmakers that have decision-making power. And so we can see kind of a little bit of the paradigm shift when we're bringing youth to Harrisburg to sit in front of these legislators, to put on press conferences, to talk about the things that they're experiencing. And the lawmakers can't deny that, because it's actual youth stories and it's things that have actually happened, and that can be proven. And so I think that's really kind of building up with my co-panelists, that I think that's the way that we can really move forward in this time, and is continue to center those who have direct experience and continue to put their voices in front of those who have decision-making power.
And just a quick follow-up, Malik, because I know one of those recommendations was around fees and fines. Right?
Yes.
And so that would have given state-level protection as far as the elimination of those fees and fines. But that can also be done on the local level, can it not?
Yes, that actually happened in the Philadelphia area. I think it was like 5 or 6 years ago. Philadelphia got rid of charging fines and fees. So I think that's one of the things too, is really targeting and drilling down into your specific county and specific local jurisdiction to get some of these changes, because that can also influence statewide policy as well.
Thank you. Again, there is power among the people. There is power in this room. I'm looking at Gada right now because she knows about it. There is power among the people. Harold.
What's the question?
Alicia was like, I don't know the question either, girl. Okay, the question was local and state level shifts that we could be looking forward to, advocating for under the current climate.
Well, I think that many of the issues we've talked about today, with the exception of Medicaid funding being a big one, are ones where there are decisions that can be made, policy shifts, at the local, county, or state level. I mean, I think that's true in most of the areas. Medicaid funding is a whole different issue that is really federally driven. And so I think there's work that can be done on all these levels. We continue to, for example, in K-12 education, we continue to promote policy changes that can have a positive impact on who ends up in the system and who doesn't, and what kinds of supports are available, and fair treatment. A lot of the decisions that are made, the policy and practice decisions that are made, are really made on the local, sometimes county, but really on the local or individual school district level. We do need good support from state institutions, whether it's the Pennsylvania Department of Education or PCCD or some others. So you want state institutions that are at least supportive in some ways of positive initiatives that occur at the local level.
Thank you for that. This feels like a bit of a crash course in civic education, which you don't learn enough in schools. just to understand how things actually get done, like that Schoolhouse Rock. Do people still watch that?
Oh yeah.
I Am a Bill.
I showed
Yes.
that for
Right.
I showed that for like career day at my kids' school. I'm like, Schoolhouse Rock, how a bill becomes a law. I need to learn that.
We gotta go
They're
back
professionals in the people that have master's degrees who don't know that. So
There are lawyers
yeah.
who don't
Yeah.
know that, yes.
there. Period. Back to we need to sue. Okay, Leisha, let us know. What about for you on the local, like hyper local level within school buildings, school districts? What can be done right now?
So I think we've touched a lot on it. So I'm also known as like the restorative practices lady. I love RJ and all the things, and I sit in circle all the time, and I sit in circle with kids and adults and all the things. And so this past spring, I did a forum, and I got kids from all over the county, and it was amazing because we always forget, y'all don't, but the system always forgets about the kids and student voice, and I'm always big on student voice. And at the end of the day, kids are kids, and they want to fight for each other. They're connected with their cell phones, right? So they all know each other. And it's just letting kids fight for one another on what's right? And so we did this, and I had kids from all over the place, like I said, in circle with teachers and educators. And then at lunch, the educators broke off and talked about what they needed, right? And so it was charter schools and public schools and private schools and all different educators just sitting peacefully with each other, right? And talking about their challenges, because we're all going through the same thing. Kids are kids. They want the same things. They need the same things. That just might look a little different, right? And so a lot of times what we do is we have very good partnerships with Pitt, with Duquesne. They give us interns to help with the mental health, for counseling, to get their hours. I'm like, give me your people. Yes, you can get your hours with me. Just so, we can really have that partnership. But also, and somebody had said how a lot of the violence prevention have lost a lot of their funding, but those violence interrupters are coming into the school on their own time, not getting paid, and that irritates me because they want us to do this work for free. And then we started paying ourselves for doing this amazing work, and now they're like, no, we don't want you to do anymore. But besides that, but they're coming in, they're meeting with kids. I had a little issue yesterday. I called a friend of mine, I'm like, yo, can you stop in? He's like, I'll be there in 10 minutes. Came in, talked to some kids. Another friend of mine came in, walked around the school, things like that. So there is this energy, right, for community partnerships. What's unique about Community School East is I have kids from all over the county. So when we started school, first day of school, I had kids from Stowe Rocks, from Keysport, Woodland Hills, Penn Hills, West Mifflin, Brentwood, and then sprinkle in a few, Moon and Avonworth kids, and I'm having a grand time every day. We had a pizza party yesterday. It was fabulous. Anyway, but I had all of those communities together, right? And I'm like, will you guys come in? Will you be a presence that first day of school? Will you come in and help? And they're like, absolutely. So it is that grassroots, local, and it's inviting people in. So a lot of the work I do as well as I go into school districts and want to work myself out of a job. Not because the federal government cut my funding, but because nobody's sending kids to Audette anymore. But really working with school districts to change their discipline policies, right? To have a more holistic approach to discipline. And so the more we do that, the better it gets. And then when we're transitioning kids out of my schools, alternative ed, really using that restorative process, that welcoming process. Like, welcome back to our school. What happened, let's start fresh, right? So really trying to educate my peers, my fellow educators, and we're all connected to really do the work, and then also invite those people in. Invite the violence interrupters in, invite whoever in, invite all of the local organizations into the school and be collaborative, because we're all in it together to help, right? We can't do it by ourselves. Like yesterday, I knew what I could do in that situation to diffuse those two young men, but I knew what I couldn't do. So it was like, hey, can you come and help me out? Because I don't understand or know the neighborhood dynamics and all of those things. And so it really is a collaborative. And so what I would say to the question, because I don't even remember it anymore, is it's definitely student voice and letting them advocate for each other, because they are so brilliant. And the ladies up here this morning, the brilliance lies in our young people. And they know what's right and wrong with their peers. So really, talking to them, and then giving everyone the courage to invite people in. Get people into your schools, into the community. Don't be afraid. Don't say, oh, well, this person doesn't have their clearance. Okay, then stand with them.
Yeah. Can
Sorry,
I?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I love it.
Can
Yes.
I just add one other thing
Please
here?
do, Harold.
So, beginning probably about 20 or so years ago, there was a big movement for, say, school discipline reform. It picked up some steam during the Obama administration, although I would say that the untold story is that grassroots people had to go to DC to educate folks about the specifics of the problems. And I remember going with parents and young people to meet with people in the Department of Education to say, hey, this is what we're experiencing. This is what our kids are experiencing. Well, once we educated folks there to the point that they would put some money into it, that also had an impact on what foundations would fund. So fast forward to today. I mean, what's happened in the last 15 years especially is that there's been a robust body of research on what actually works to improve school climate. You know, we actually know a lot more about that at a micro level, at a macro level, than ever before. I mean, that's really one of the positive things. And we have to remember those lessons, restate those lessons, elevate those lessons drawn from the research when the current administration puts out whatever you want to call it, disinformation about that, or hateful policy statements. The other thing is that we actually know a lot more about why some kids are disproportionately negatively impacted than others, by gender, by race, gender, disability, and all of those things. So, you know, and a lot of that research and learning and investigating has happened in the last 15 or so years. And so I do think now's the time when we need to summarize those lessons, call on them, restate them, put them in the faces of policymakers, local, county, and state, and our state institutions to remind people about what options exist and what their responsibilities are, whether it's in the juvenile justice field or in education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or healthcare.
So I'm hearing, I mean, from all of you, the need to center student voices, youth voices, community voices. I'm hearing the need to be research-driven in our approaches, and also the need to just understand the mechanics of how decisions and policies are made, and focusing on local institutions that can be shifted during this time. But questions from you all as we come to a close on this panel. Any questions or thoughts from our audience today? We have an intimate group, so we would love to hear your voices. Yes, please, Judge Clark.
I just want to say thanks to the panel for this presentation. You know, the issue of education is so very important. I still, you know, I grew up in a very blended family with a lot of issues, but school was like the place where I was grounded. I loved everything about school. My teachers were wonderful. I felt like all my teachers loved me. My friends were there. We had activities. It was safe. And I never wanted to miss school. And I pray that every child has the same school experience that I have, but many don't. But I just want to give a shout out to Dr. Lentz and the AIU, who have provided, I think, really wonderful education for our incarcerated kids, some in the county jails waiting charge as adults, and formerly in our former detention center. I'm really sad about state of education. Our judges said that that was probably the only good thing about the detention center formerly was the education that they got there. And it is vitally important. And lastly, I'd just like to thank you all for mentioning the youth voice. It's critically important. I think as I'm sort of out of the loop now, but you know, I always said that the best advice I ever got were from the people that were in my courtroom, the children and families. And they have listening to them, really listening to them, and I encourage everybody to listen to what they have to say, because that really will point you in the direction you need to go. They will tell you everything you need to know if you take the time to listen. So I thank you for really strongly advocating for the youth voice in every aspect of the work that we do. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge Clark. Thank you for your advocacy as well.
I want to take a minute to thank Judge Clark too for a lot of things, but also, as Malik mentioned, Judge Clark was a part of the Juvenile Justice Reform Task Force and was instrumental in a lot of the recommendations that got proposed, and a few that got they didn't go all the way through because there was a change of administration, but hopefully we can see how that comes back to life.
Put the things to stop. A lot of them required legislative changes. There were some that were changes to the rules, but some of the Rules Committee were waiting for some of the legislative changes to be implemented. Some of them did happen. One of them that has happened, and when you talked about what can you do locally, sometimes what jurisdictions are doing locally can lead to statewide change and reform. One of the things that's now the rule is that judges have to do more frequent review of children's cases that are incarcerated. And so the two largest counties were already doing that. Philly and Allegheny County were doing the frequent reviews. That really gets you in tune to if there are issues, for those kids who have to go to placement, or even for kids that are not in placement but at home. Sometimes you can see some of the issues before they get too out of hand and be able to make some changes. So there are things that we can change our own internal practices locally, and we have really good data in Pennsylvania, and so the data will tell us what's working, and if we pay attention to that data, then sometimes that leads to statewide reform or mandate from our Supreme Court. So it does help.
Thank you, Judge Clark. I think I saw someone maybe over here.
It's all right.
Thank you guys so much. I've really enjoyed hearing each of your perspectives. My name is Janae Blake. I don't live in Pennsylvania or Pittsburgh, but when I come here, I feel filled up. And as Ms. Kara said, just always have to applaud you. I live in Texas, not one of the free states. So always have to applaud even the incremental work you're doing. But I want to ask you all something, because we want to talk about changing policy on the local level. And I'm stepping out of my hat as a researcher and a professor, but coming to you as a single mom and being exhausted and working, and I got a cushy job, but still working, taking care of my family, but then seeing these things that are wrong. How do we help mobilize people who are not in these agencies and systems to reach their voice, right? You mentioned, Harold, talking about the messaging and the branding. So how do we get these messages to family members, parents, and where do they go to localize this? Because it is easy to hear this and want to do something and feel a sense of helplessness. I sometimes feel overwhelmed with everything that's happening. And I even sometimes, even though I have a lot of social capital and I'm very networked, am stumped on what I can do at an individual level. Yes, I can write my senator and legislator with the generic text that goes out of go against this or support this bill, but can we talk a little bit, even at a micro level, of what are we doing? So we're talking about these issues, but how do we give people explicit strategies to enact their power? And also recognize that, in a sense, for some people, they may be real or perceived consequences or threats, right, to speaking out. I always tell my students, I'm not a killer, but don't push me, but I also got a mortgage to pay for, right? So I got kids in college, so I can walk with you, but I can't walk with you to the point that it's going to be. So how do we do that? And that's a tough question, I know, but I think it's something, as we imagine this, yes, we want to engage people, there's things we can do for local policy, but what does that look like for someone who's not interconnected into these systems?
On this last observation you made, we often find that parents who have multiple children in the same district are reluctant to speak out about something, a mistreatment of one child, because they fear, quite legitimately, that it will be taken out on other children. So there are many situations in which I've seen that all over the state of Pennsylvania. So I hear you on that one. I think it's a combination of things. In some of these areas, actually parents and students, but actually parents even more so than students, actually have rights. And so helping people learn their rights and helping people exercise their rights in certain areas, especially in the K-12 public education space, is an important piece of the work. I mean, that's not the total answer to that question, but that's an important piece of the work. When I think about the things that I hear complaints about, actually, some of them are things that you can do something about if you could exercise your rights. And sometimes exercising your rights means having other people stand with you to exercise your rights. It's a little bit harder to do it on your own sometimes, although sometimes you can do it on your own. I mean, I think that's a piece of the overall work.
Other thoughts?
Hi, Jamal. Single mom. I think that what we have to do is we have to treat people better. And I could be cliche and say, well, we need better teacher prep programs. Well, we do. We need to make sure that the teachers that are going into our schools, the administrators, the leaders, have an empathetic ear and can understand and relate and over-communicate and do all the things. Because I know that sometimes if a kid is misbehaving in school and their parent is always called, they don't want to come to the school. Do you think they feel welcome to the school? So it really is learning how to talk to each other and understanding each other, and that's a seismic shift in changing hearts and minds, right? The other thing is use your school board, right? Go to school board meetings, get a group, go to PTO meetings. You know, it's not all about selling popcorn for the field day, right? It's go to meetings, talk to your principal, talk to your administrators, and bring people from the community with you. I was so refreshed 2 weeks ago. It was open house. My daughter goes to Dixon at Woodland Hills. It was packed. 6, 7, 8 building. It was packed with parents, and they had a spread, and we were able to taste the food. It was all gone by because I was late because of my daughter's always late. But but she was late. But it was so fun, and it was a communal thing, right? And everybody feels welcomed. And it sounds so trivial and so basic, but like we've lost the sense of community, right? And there's a lot of factors. I'm not from here. I was born here. I moved here. This, that, all the things that we know are by design, right? But we have an obligation to whatever community our kids are in to make that a bigger community, right? And really, it does take a village. And so, some of the things that I do, because I deal with kids from all across the county, is really just talking to their administrators, talking to the parents, welcoming them in, what do you need? Like just simple things to let them know that you care. It's so simple, but we've gotten away from that. And when, Harold, when you were talking about, and to Shira, different things, and you have to be willing to change, we have to put our pride away. Like, we all think that we're the experts and we know what we're doing and all the things. It's like, no, listen to somebody else. And so for me, I try to empathize as best that I can, and life is hard. The single mom life is not for the weary, but I'm a product of a single mom. And my mom was a social worker, so I have a double whammy, right? I want to help everybody. But it's just, you have to be able to take a step out of your comfort zone as us in this room and bring people along, right? And make them feel comfortable in your space. We don't do that anymore. We're very rigid. And I think we have to make sure that people know that their voices are heard. So again, I don't want to sound trivial or simple, but it really is just making connection and making community and making sure that you're providing a safe space, not only for the kids, but for the families and for the community to come into the building, meet us, say hello, break bread with us. Simple things like that, but it is hard. And utilize your school board for good, because sometimes school boards get a little crazy, but just a little bit. But use that voice as well. I mean, they're your officials in your community, so use it.
Right, and if you're somebody who might have the privilege to not be one of the people who's hardest hit by these cuts, still go and support your fellow community members. Go and stand in solidarity with them. There's power in numbers. So I think that, like Alicia said, we don't want to step out of our comfort zone. We're worried about staying in our lanes or being afraid. Now is not the time for that. We need to put all that aside. And I think that like you're saying, at the very micro level, going to school district, school board meetings, going to PTO meetings, even just like parent engagement strategies that some school districts have, like different little events that they host, like a bonfire in one of the school districts. Like it starts small and with building community. Like we are all in this together, and we've had this, like, for whatever reason, everything's gotten so fragmented and that whole fabric has just been kind of torn apart. We really need to get that knit back together, I think, just starting from the most basic level.
So I mean, my kids went to Philadelphia Public Schools K to 12. And before I was a professional advocate, before I came to the ACLU, I was a parent activist, like organizing other parents. And one of the things that we did in the elementary schools, some elementary schools, is we set up these joint staff parent committees, like the school, that actually assumed a lot of authority over how decisions were made at schools. And those committees met, they looked at the data on their schools, like who was being provided certain opportunities, things like that. And they taught those committees, I was the co-chair of one of them when I was a parent activist. The committees talked about what could be done differently in the school. Is there something wrong with the layout? Is there something wrong with the schedule of the school? Which kids are succeeding, which are not? I mean, we obviously didn't look at anything of a personal nature about specific kids, but we looked at sort of trends in their schools. And that committee made recommendations for how the principals should spend the little pots of discretionary money in the schools. But the committee sort of empowered itself to do that. But it was a joint staff parent committee, which included the janitor. When people talk about staff, they often just talk about professional certified teachers, but it included teachers, the janitor, and parents. And we looked at those things and proposed sort of school-based solutions, not for the bigger problems, but at least for some things that would improve the school environment and create a more equitable environment. So for example, one of the things that we found out is that only certain parents knew about certain kinds of opportunities that were available and other parents did not. So if you looked at who participated in which opportunities, it really broke down by race. But it didn't say anything about the capacity of those kids. It's the opportunities and how some people got a foot in the door and others did not. That's one of the things that we looked at as a team.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to that. So if you're in Pennsylvania and you're interested in getting involved in kind of juvenile justice advocacy and kind of reform of the system, there are several kind of statewide coalitions that are already in existence that you can very easily get tapped into, and I happen to be members of them. So if you're interested, reach out to me. But there's the Pennsylvania Youth Justice Alliance that is doing a lot of juvenile justice reform work, and we already have a network of lawyers and different community-based organizations, and we plan trips to Harrisburg to do press conferences, different things like that. There's also the Care Not Control Coalition, which is a youth-based, youth-led coalition that also does a lot of advocacy work around the state and does various trips to Harrisburg to kind of advocate for juvenile justice reform. And then there's also the Pennsylvania Justice Alliance, which is more kind of adult criminal system reform based, but they're also doing a lot of statewide work and monitoring bills, different things like that. So kind of the biggest thing is to get tapped in. There's, as my co-panelist Laura mentioned, there's definitely strength in numbers. So if you can band together with other folks that are experiencing similar issues, and you can, put in that kind of time to be able to make your presence known in Harrisburg, there's a lot that could be gained from that. And if you don't have the bandwidth to do it yourself, then get tapped into some of the coalitions and organizations that are doing that work and say that you're interested, and then they can kind of leverage your stories and your experiences to kind of push some of this reform that's hopefully on the horizon.
Thank you. And when I hear that question, Amelia, I also think about advocacy that is completely outside of a system as it is currently designed. And so a couple things come to mind for me. As Alicia said, we are no longer in community. And one of the things that we haven't talked about on this stage yet, well, Harold, you mentioned misinformation, is the way that we are under attack algorithmically right now. Mis and disinformation is at a complete high. And we are being red-pilled left and right. The other side moves like a cult. It is indoctrinating people. And so in order to break through that, we have to sit in community in real life And I think, Jamelia, about just the time I would spend when I was in law school in political education with friends, just sitting down over a meal, breaking bread, talking about a news article, a documentary, a movie, nonfiction, fiction books, and just chatting about the state of the world through another lens. I think those moments are really important. Number two, as Teresa said yesterday, we are all philanthropists in some way, either by time, resources, money, in some way we can give. And so small giving circles to things that we really, really care about. Malik talked about how DC is currently under attack. Other democratic cities, it is coming into that vein, right? It's headed that way. They've already signaled that. So me and my friends are in a giving circle about how we can get some of what's happening down people's timelines. DC has about 5 really big social media accounts that all of us follow, especially Black and brown folks. So how can we get some political education down people's timelines through those platforms by buying ad space? We don't need no system to do that. We can do that ourselves. Other questions?
Hi. I was like, thank you for sharing your insights, but I wanted to see if you guys were able to expound upon maybe the youth voices. I know you talked about the forum that you held, and kind of expound upon what the youth were actually saying, because we know that we can leverage the power of the youth and their voices to be able to create change. As you've seen in history, a lot of change has come from the youth. So do we know what they're saying and their perspective, and is there even a stake in them for this fight that we are all kind of pushing against?
So the biggest thing is they were excited to be heard, because a lot of times we don't give kids the space to tell their story. So just the fact that they had a day to just say how they were feeling, they really embraced that. And once they got comfortable with that, and I want to say I had 5th graders all the way to seniors, and different staff members brought them. But the biggest thing for me is they kept saying, please listen to us. This is what we want. And what they want clean schools. They want safe schools. They want to be able to learn in a safe environment. They want to be able to do things. They want to wear hoodies. You know, they want their cell phones. And I'm going to tell you something. I was in a school district. we're not gonna name names, but I was in a school district. I was invited out there for an event, and they were doing this great inclusive thing. They were putting handprints all over the mirrors. It was great. Now, I had my principal hat on because, can't have this. And, the kids were just walking down the halls with their cell phones and this and that. And I'm like, I said, don't you have, a policy on cell phones? Because, I'm thinking. They're like, no, our kids come to school ready to learn. I was like, oh, your kids come, and mine don't? Because, I'll have that conversation. But the kids really, they want to be trusted. And I think what we've done through rules, and I'm speaking as the principal, right? We don't trust our kids, and they just want to be trusted. They want to be able to walk to school. They want to be able to do what they do during classes. They want to stay after school. They want clubs. They want programs. They want to be active. They want to be involved. And that was the biggest thing for me is they just need to be heard, and they want to be trusted. But they also want to be safe, and they want help for their friends, because they know that some of their friends, have behavior issues, right, or behavior issues that we don't think are right for our system, right? But they also know of the gun violence that's going on in the community, and they want to be safe. So they understand all of that. They're very tuned in. But the biggest thing that the adults were saying is how, I don't want to say surprised, but how much they understood where the kids were coming from and how basic it was. And so what I can say for what they're saying, and even when I talk to kids now, and they're in alternative ed, all the things, they just want to be listened to and really trusted that they know what they need. Now, we all know that sometimes they don't all know what we need. I'm raising a 12-year-old, right? And we try to give them the tools, but it was that back and forth that was something that was very powerful to them, because they were able then to say what they needed. And it really was, trust us and keep us safe. Because they're not blind to the violence that's happening, whether it be the violence in their communities, school shootings, they're very in tune to that. They're very in tune to what's happening across the country. And so that was the biggest thing, was really just being heard, and then what they need for their education. Brilliant, and my 5th graders were on fire. They loved every minute of it, and they sent me thank you cards, and I have them on my wall because I love them. And they were from McKeesport, and they were brilliant. I love them.
5th graders are so good.
5th graders are so much fun.
Yeah, but around about middle school, though, it can go a little dark.
Yeah.
We love you. We love you so much.
She didn't even leave. I don't know where my kid is.
So I'm actually a big fan of school confidential school climate surveys of students, which is now coming under attack by the U.S. Department of Education, unfortunately. But I'm a big fan of that, of what you can learn from that, whether it's the standardized one from the CDC or other ones, that, anonymous, obviously, so that students can identify what they see as challenges and problems in that school community. And sometimes the answer is just like a different layout, a different schedule, a different way of doing things. Some of these are things that cost a lot of money, but are a different set of relationships, a different way of dealing with certain kinds of problems. So that's one thing. I'm a huge fan of that. And then the second thing in the school discipline arena is that I find that students are willing to accept certain forms of discipline, and I don't mean extreme discipline or turn everything into an exclusionary one, but to certain forms of sort of appropriate discipline if they feel that discipline is administered fairly. If they don't trust the adults who administer discipline to administer it fairly, then they're less willing to accept it and become more resentful of schools and more alienated from schools.
Thank you. Any other questions? Last question from the audience before we move on, because we have work to do. Once again, we're going to be a community together. Okay, please. Dr. Kathy left with the mic, but Amy, can you?
Here I am.
Oh, I'm sorry. I can't. Dr.
Listen,
Kathy,
these lights
They are fierce, these lights.
I know, we've been dealing with them for 3 days. I just have a comment. We're talking about community, and pet peeve of mine, or great irritation, is the competition between public school, and I'm going to say this cuss word, charter school, and private school. Now, when this whole No Child Left Behind thing started, got behind that. But if we're about the students and our children, we need to find a way to make it so everybody's not fighting for resources, and we can just worry about educating the students, whether you go to public school, charter school, or private school, or even homeschool kids. But that's the big irritation, because when I went to school, there was a public school, the neighborhood school, or you went to Catholic school. That was it. That's all, just a comment.
Thank you for that. Any reflections on what also to me I hear being signaled here is about a competition for resources, especially during this time?
You mean between schools or between organizations?
I think both, honestly. Yeah.
So, there's a lot going on on different levels. One, you have in our state a system of inequitable funding of schools. And it's a historic thing. It's been addressed in litigation. The legislature has not stepped up nearly enough. And that push and the coalitions pushing that need to continue, and they need to build and grow to press for a correction to that. I mean, that's not, and that's an important piece of work to address the systemic inequities that have existed over a long period of time. There's no substitute for that kind of work. So that's one thing. The second thing is that you cannot have a situation, in my view, where whether it's charter schools or other kinds of schools sort of cannibalize the resources for school districts. I mean, keep in mind that school districts have to accept almost anybody who walks in the door and try in some ways to address their needs. You know, that's the core value of public education. So you cannot have a funding scheme where sort of independent schools can cannibalize the school resources as well. I don't have any particular sort of political, ideological views that I want to express beyond that, but you can't have a system where, you know, there are different levels of accountability and one network of schools cannibalize the core public education resources. I know there may be other.
They all kick kids out and send them to me, just so you know.
Right.
They do all the things.
And you have to take them.
Yes.
Right. I mean, I'm not always suggesting that that's a burden, but I'm just saying that's the system of public education. There are certain schools that are there and are
It's not
expected
a
to
level
take the children
playing
who
field.
walk in the door
Yeah.
as long as they meet residency requirements, et cetera.
Thank you. Any last words from our panelists? First of all, this has been an excellent panel. So everyone, please clap it up for our panelists. But any last words for you all you'd like to leave us off with?
If anybody would like to come and visit my school and talk to my kids, I welcome everyone. If you want to come in and help, if you want to be a mentor, like I said, I get kids from all over the county. Right now we got about 25, and when you think about alternative kids or whatever, they're fine. But like seriously, so grab me later, because I would love to, I love to expose our kids to different, different people that they might not see in their normal school, and then maybe you can follow them back to that school district. So if anybody's trying to, get into a school district or have a program or whatever, literally, like that's my role. I want to make sure that, we're all impacting as many kids as we can. So I just welcome you to come to Community School East in Turtle Creek. We have a ball down there, and you can hang out with me too.
Yeah, thank you all for having me. I'm really just appreciative of this space and this coalition of folks that are kind of doing this work. And I just really wanted to underscore the power that youth voice has, and you all matter and your voices matter. So you can really mobilize that to spur some change.
Yes, I want to say thank you for allowing me to be here and learn from you all. I've learned a lot this morning. Whenever I was initially asked to be on the panel and talk about the landscape, I was just thinking about how bleak everything is. And being here with you all today, I really do feel a sense of hope in terms of rebuilding. You see like the big federal changes, things that can't necessarily get offset, but it can help us come together as a community. It can help us be laser focused on the local issues that we can control. I think about families and toxic stress and lack of economic resources, like including health insurance or SNAP benefits, and how that leads to school discipline issues and absenteeism. Those are all things that we can control at the school district level and at the community level. And I'm inspired after being here with you all today. Thank you.
Yeah. And I would say that I think it's important that we steal more as in Steelers than in stealing an election, but steal up our local and state institutions to make them do their jobs, in compliance with longstanding both state and federal law, even if the federal government's not going to do it. But we have to make these institutions, we have to hold them to the equity agenda.
Many thanks. Clap it up for them one more time. You all may exit the stage. And while they are exiting,
I just want to say thank you, and as you all come down this way, Amy's going to give us a small token of appreciation. One thing I want to say too is that we talked about youth voice. We have the girls that are in the session on their own in the next room, and so they will be coming back to share some of the ideas that they have on the agenda that we should follow for 2025 through 2026. So please stay tuned for that.